bubble. Crack it open. Punch the junk in there.
Put the one off your original TT.
Okay, okay. Mass airflow, you said?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Original car, you use mass airflow. Of course, if you're running motoric, you're not going to use that. You're using that sensor. But connecting all the accelerator cable from your original harness and adapting that to the Motronic harness for 3.6 liter.
Okay.
See this, let's come along. The spaghetti. Next step is going to hook up, like I said, there's mass airflow.
Okay. Cool. Yep, got the drain plug right there. That's it. There. Needs to fill up for this side. Push the plug. And there's a drain plug in the front. So way up there. Fill up plug right there. Let's see. Plug right there. Drain right there. Fill up right there. Another drain up front. And do both washer. All that's right here. We got the fill up plug right here. Place that. It's the hot X side, so it's two sides. The hot X side, this is the drain up here for it. And this is the diff side. Fill up plug, drain plug. Fill up plug. There it goes, looks pretty good. Up there on the top. Pump side, I took one screw out, the other one at the bottom, at the top. I can pull it out, drain it, and clean my screen. Alright, pump it loose. Pull it out. Drain. filter over at the end of this. For the screen. Alright, let me get it. There we go. Got it off. Actually looks better. Glad I checked it out. Screen is clean. Like new. Just received oil. The Haldex oil and the diff oil. And Haldex oil. But look how they did me greasy. Short me. You only need 3/4 of it. And look at my diff. Gave me too much. What's pumping? Right up in there. Getting close to full. We're on the diff side. Alright, just finished up. The drain plug in. These drain plugs look good. Cleaned up and
Throttle valve. That's what I double check to make sure everything is set up properly.
getting it together. You guys on YouTube. That's it. What's going on? How's it coming, bro?
It's coming.
See y'all here rolling.
Yeah, make a little progress.
Mm-hmm.
A little engine oil in the car.
Okay.
Trying to fill up the transmission fluid, but that would not go. So I just got finished ordering a transmission pump, high quality pump. So
Yeah.
Pump it in there, it would not go. The fluid sat in the oil filter housing for like 15 minutes and didn't even drain.
What? Damn.
Not even drain down.
So you putting the oil coolers back on?
Yeah, I put that one on temporarily because I would have to order some adapters to connect the transmission cooler, but for the time being, I would still have to run a U just so when the oil pumps it out, it comes out and goes back in.
Okay.
So until we get set up with that, it's best just either put this back on, or I would need the -8 and fittings to connect that move to each other. So
all right, cool.
Temporarily, just to keep everything, get everything prepped up for startup. So it's slowly coming along.
All right, cool.
Tedious, spaghetti everywhere.
Yeah, see, hell yeah. Yeah, you had to take the waste go. Oh yeah,
just
see,
to try to fill, and that was no go. So I'm just great. I'm putting all this stuff back on. Yeah, just so that way we'll fill it from the bottom.
Yep.
Like I said.
Yeah,
so
yep.
I ordered the DQ500 transmission adapter to connect into the housing, and that way you can pump it up. So,
okay.
Yeah, it'll go a lot easier. That should be Thursday, Friday.
All right, cool.
Have the wheels on. They don't look bad. Car definitely needs to be lowered. Drop it down easy, 1 inch to 1.25 inches in the front, and in the back probably a 1/2 inch, but it definitely needs to be dropped. No doubt. I definitely need to drive this vehicle a lot more. You can literally see my brake rotors have rust coated on them because this car sits so much. I definitely need to drive it a lot more, especially in the front, all of that rust. So once I take it for a test drive, burn that rust off and the rotors are nice and shiny, it'll give it a nice look, more aggressive look, instead of rusty brake rotors sitting behind a nice set of wheels. Made a little progress, but never as much as I would like. We have some of the fittings on our oil pressure regulator. I've already ordered a turbo oil filter, and correct, yes, they do sell turbo oil filters. In fact, even Turbo Smart sells a turbo oil filter, so that way you can keep your turbo oil clean and try to keep any type of particles from trying to go down into this little small orifice right there. So that's a good thing. I ordered a couple of them, one for Teddy's car, one for my car. I also have it set up down here properly, nice and neat.
so that way we can get to our oil pressure sensor, which is the top sensor up top, and at the bottom that's going to be my oil feed. I have a banjo fitting connected to that. Have my oil temperature sensor plugged into my oil adapter flange, so that turned out pretty good. And now I'm getting closer and closer to play with the wire, and that's why I wanted to get all of this set up so that I could wire this stuff up. So we're getting close. Have my lower fuel rail injector wires hanging right here, of course, pressure sensor, temperature sensor, that way we can measure the temperature coming out of the oil cooler. And now I can start playing with the ECU wiring so we can get this thing wired up. But it took me a good 45 minutes easily just to get off the wipers. These things are probably original wiper blades, wiper arms, and never have been removed, and these things were on there. I have an assortment of pullers to try to get this stuff off, and it was crazy. Of course, windshield wiper pullers and different things like this, and this stuff just didn't have the balls, I'll just go ahead and say it, to pop that sucker off. But this worked right here. I even have this battery terminal puller and alternator bearing, and this thing could not do it. I started bending this upper arm, just trying to rotate it around, get enough pressure to get it off. But this heavy gauge steel ball joint press ended up popping it out nice and neat without any type of damage to the upper windage tray. So that's a good thing right there. So now let's pop this off so we can get to the ECU in that corner, and we can map out our wiring for how we're going to wire this bad boy up. We have our windage tray removed. A little excitement coming through the neighborhood. And we now have access to the original brains for the 3.2 liter. I took loose the screw right here, popped this zip tie. We'll cut this other zip tie right here, and we'll have access to easily pull this bad boy out. More parts came in for the TT, and our heavy duty oil hose came in. So this is a reinforced hose. It's a lot more durable than the temporary hose I had down there. This is more of a permanent hose for the time being and for the duration of how long it lasts. So it's a pretty good hose. This should suffice for the moment anyway. And we're going to go ahead and connect our feed line also. So today's objective, feed line to the turbocharger with the oil filter. So the turbo oil filter came in, and the return hose going down to the oil pan. Also, I'm going to start finally messing with the electrical wiring. So we have our factory ECU out. I have the 3.6 liter Motronic unit. We're going to start wiring that up and make preparations to finally try to turn this thing over. So we got a little ways to go. Have to break out the harness and start wiring it up, and we'll see how far we can get over the next week or two. I have my turbo feed and return lines connected, coming from the oil flange housing through a banjo fitting down to a 90 up, and through a turbo oil filter into the turbo regulator and feeding the turbo. Returning back down, heavy duty turbo return line, and back into the top part of the oil pan. Now I'm going to have to clock the return line over a little bit so that I have clearance for my clamp. And also, of course, this is going to have to come out the way because this was originally used in application to support the harness for DQ500. So this is going to come out, and or this bracket right here was the original one for the Audi TT, and I fabricated it off the pan just to made up on here. But since all of the other modifications to get the turbo plumbing to fit, I had to get as much pipe work and in the tight confines as possible, and managed to do it with 3.5 inch piping. This comes off of here, but this bracket will just come out of the way. I removed the compressor housing and reclocked the position of my oil return line, and everything turned out pretty good. I still have my band connection just a little bit loose, so that way if I need to shift or rotate my turbo a little bit. But I have the clearance that I need. It's a tight squeeze in there, but nothing is really touching, but very tight to get this big 3.5-inch pipe and route it inside this tight engine compartment, at the same time with making sure you have enough clearance over here for the headlight. So this was a tight fit, definite tight squeeze, but we managed to get this bad boy in here, making some progress. So now let's go ahead and start picking up with the wiring for the Motec. Now I can finally say I'm there to start playing with some wiring. I have the schematics already out for the Audi TT 3.2 and the Passat 3.6 liter. So I just need the basic wiring diagram, so that way we can just go through, check out connections, make sure that I am converting everything from the original TT ECU over to the Motronic unit for the 3.6. Vacuum all the dust and debris from off in the windage tray area, get a lot of that debris from out of there, and I'm making some extra changes also. So I installed a support bracket for hoisting the engine out of the car, and I'm probably going to relocate the oil pressure regulator. It's a little close to the turbo, and I would like to move this a little bit further away. So even if I'm going in here making cam adjustments and stuff like that, this would just be over to the side. And if I have to take off the side plate, a lot of this will be out of the way. I still would have pretty good access to it with just removing this pipe. And to be honest, look like I can still get this front cover plate off without even taking this off, because it's just 2 dowel pins on each side. Once you remove the screws from around the surrounding, you can just press it and prop it off, and it'll still slide right out of there. So that would be enough room to slide that out. So more likely, I'm going to reposition this over here. I may cut some of this off, so that way when I come off of this with a 90, it'll still clear this bracket. And this will be over here. What I want to utilize also is we can do a few things. You have a port right on the front for a gauge. So that's our option. We can always monitor the oil pressure that's coming into the turbocharger, and you can visibly see the oil pressure itself. Or another option would be to put a pressure transducer or pressure sensor in here as well. And you can use a Motec just to program an alarm. If this filter starts to clog up and get full of debris, then I can have an alarm populate, and that way we'll know that this filter is getting clogged and it's time for change. So that's a good thing also. Even with the gauge, you can still monitor it, and if your pressure starts dropping down, you'll know that this element is getting filled up with particles and reducing the oil coming to the sending unit itself. So that's something I'm going to do. If I did put a sensor here and we use that to go to the Motec, I would want the extra clearance by mounting it over in this area, and just it's a little tight up in here also. So let's do that. So I sliced off the front hoist support bracket. It turned out really good. I was going to notch off that front beveled piece that came over this way anyway to the side, because I needed that extra clearance to come off my fuel rail with a 90. So now I have nice good clearance, as you can see, all around my fuel rail. Come off this. This is a dash 10, 90. Run my hose for my return, for my fuel rail, feed or return, just depending on what side I want to run it on. And this served as a double purpose with me slicing off and just rotating the bottom part over into a 90, and now I can support my oil pressure regulator. I'm going to slice this little corner off, paint the bracket black, and put it back on the vehicle. Performing one last mock fitting before I paint the bracket. It turned out fairly well. I like the fact that I was able to move the oil pressure regulator a little further from the heat source from the turbocharger. And secondly, when I had it mounted up here, I had the hose feeding the inlet snake down, and I was blocking part of the coolant fitting for feeding the turbocharger. So now I got a lot more space over in this section, and over in this part of the vehicle, this little area was pretty much open. There wasn't too much blocking. I had to go back look through some of my old photos when I had mocked up the whole front end on the vehicle, and this turned out to be a pretty good location. I have my engine hoist bracket back on, so if we have to snatch the engine back out, as well as this in a little bit better location. So now let's take this off, paint it up, and I keep saying I want to get to the wiring. Hopefully I can finally get to that. I rerouted my turbo line also and shortened it up a little bit. I put a 45 on here so that way I can tuck this a little bit further back behind here, and just in case when I feed the oil cooler hoses from off of this adapter, I can tuck this back in the corner and still have good clearance because it's open pocket right here. That'll let me feed these lines right here without the extra interference. Had the oil filter housing bolted back into position, and it's turning out pretty good. So I had things mocked up, a nice clean bolt on without any type of major modification other than just bolting on pieces that work. The banjo fitting worked out great. That gives me like a 1/2 inch clearance between the back part of my motor housing for my drive-by wire. As you can see, plenty of clearance. I can get my pinky in between here. Not bad at all. So we're not making any type of contact there. I'm just deciding on how I want to clock this. I can clock it down a little lower and have my hose come back up, or I can clock this and it'll be behind this outlet hose right here. I was test fitting different AN fittings for my oil cooler adapter, and of course the oil cooler itself came with 90-1090 fittings, but I knew the way this was mounted in this application that 45s would probably work a little bit better. That way I can come off with a nice taper, flow the hose towards the oil cooler without having to have a 90 come up and then flex the hose back down as much. But either way, I can still utilize both. The 45s will be a more cleaner fit to my liking, but just for what we already have. Just received the package today from Motion Racework. We have our Rife sensor, and this thing is very nice. So we'll open this up when we get prepped to put this into the intake plenum. We have our cable, our 90 degree, as well as the connection. So this is nice looking. This should fit very well on our Skunkworks intake plenum. So let's prepare to get this stuff installed.